Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another Fright Night Friday DVD, Blu-ray, and book update. Yeah, I got a whole bunch of stuff this week. Once again, basically prepping for the forthcoming Halloween shenanigans. By now, you probably have some idea of what the theme of it is going to be, unless I've already mentioned it, I can't remember. Anyway, we're basically going to be taking a look at the classic monsters, so stuff like Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, Mummy, the Invisible Man, and the Creature from the Black Lagoon, the original Universal Monsters ones, but also a lot of the other adaptations of them, and that includes the original books, where there are original books. So anyway, I picked up a whole bunch more stuff for that, so let's take a look today on the Multimedia Chronicles. Welcome back. Alright, let's start off with, actually I said Blu-ray, didn't I? There's no Blu-rays in this update. It's actually all DVD, because all of the DVDs I got are all stuff that is not available on Blu-ray. So, let us begin here. So, first up, what year is this from? Does it say? 1973. And this one is, I think it's also 1973. Anyway, in the early 70s, Dan Curtis, who was the probably most well known for Dark Shadows, he did an adaptation of Dracula, which, as you know, I picked up on Blu-ray recently. Well, he also did an adaptation of Frankenstein. So this was a 1973 TV movie, or miniseries, I guess, that was done. Let's give you a quick look inside. Very nice. It's a very nice addition from MPI Home Video, the folks who released every single episode of Dark Shadows, old and new, on DVD. Actually, no, they did not do the DVD release of the new Dark Shadows. That was MGM, I believe, and I did a rant video about that a while ago. By the way, they did finally release a newer edition of the new Dark Shadows, which put it in the correct 4:3 aspect ratio. It's still not the extended versions of the episodes that were on the old VHS releases, but it is the correct aspect ratio, at least. So it's 4:3, not the horribly cropped 16:9 that the original MGM DVDs were. So, and otherwise bare bones, I think. I don't think there's any extras on it. So that edition came out, and then I think it's already out of print, so good luck finding it. Anyway, around the same time that this version came out, we got this sumptuous miniseries adaptation called Frankenstein: The True Story. And this basically, I guess it was a two-part miniseries. It's 3 hours long. Quite a notable cast in here. You got James Mason, David McCallum, Jane Seymour. Yeah, this is like A-list cast here. So this version kind of overshadowed this version. So this one didn't get as much attention as this one did. I guess, I don't know why, but it was the year of Frankenstein miniseries. And then more recently, does this have a year on it? This was 2003? Yeah, it's 2003 miniseries, Frankenstein. So we got Frankenstein, and Frankenstein. And this one stars Luke Goss, Alec Newman, William Hurt, and Donald Sutherland. So, again, pretty high-caliber cast there. Very cool. I have not seen any of these before. I've seen them around. There's not much in this edition here. But I've never actually seen these particular adaptations, so I'm really looking forward to checking them out. This one was another mini-series version. It's also clocks in at about 3 hours in length. This one is a little over 2 hours. I don't know why it's shorter, but so anyway, so 3 completely different Frankenstein TV miniseries is, none of which I've seen. So this will be pretty exciting for me because Frankenstein has always been probably my favorite of the classic monsters. It's just, there's a lot of reasons why I like that one, and I think it resonates with me so well. And we'll probably go into all of that over the course of Halloween month. So next up, the other classic monster. Of course, some of you actually recommended this one to me. I didn't even know about it, so thank you very much to those of you who put me on the hunt for it. We have the 1971 BBC miniseries adaptation of Dracula entitled Count Dracula, starring Louis Jourdan, who I most remember as Anton Arcane from the 1982 Swamp Thing movie. But apparently he's fantastic as Dracula in this, and this was a TV adaptation, so, you know, early 70s BBC, so you can imagine the sort of, I'm guessing it's all shot on video and with outdoor scenes shot on film, much like everything was back then. I love that old school style, mainly because I grew up with it. But there's just kind of a charm about it to me that it didn't matter that they didn't have a ton of money to spend on the actual, you know, production side of things. So they put it all into costume sets and, above all else, the caliber of acting and writing. So really looking forward to checking this one out. I've heard from a lot of you that this is one of the best adaptations out there as far as faithfulness goes. So I look forward to that. That's one thing I'm going to be talking about in the Halloween stuff, actually, is how faithful these various adaptations are to the original books. So in the case of Dracula and Frankenstein in particular, those will be sort of the big two. So I'm in the middle of reading the original Dracula for the very first time. I've actually never read the book before. And then following that, I'm going to be reading Frankenstein, but we'll get to that in just a moment. And then finally, I picked up Dracula Dead and loving it, because, of course, part of the Frankenstein selections will be Young Frankenstein. So I thought, well, I should get the other Mel Brooks parody, Dracula Dead and loving it. Surprisingly, this is not available on Blu-ray. There is a high-definition transfer floating around out there. It's shown up on TV a few times, and you can find it online if you poke around a little bit. But, you know, at the very least, I wanted to support the one official release that there is. And this is dirt cheap, too. You can get this for like about $5. I think I paid about $5 for this. So, and it's got some pretty cool extras on it, too. It's got commentary and some behind-the-scenes stuff. Actually, no. So it's got a commentary, but apparently it's quite a good commentary, so very cool. So anyway, I saw this on pay TV many moons ago, and I remember enjoying it quite a bit. It doesn't quite have the same classiness, I guess, as Young Frankenstein. I mean, Young Frankenstein is definitely the better film, but I remember thinking that this one was really funny, too. So this will probably be later in the rotation, because apparently a lot of the scenes and references in there are very direct references to a lot of the famous old versions of Dracula, and apparently that's one of the things that go into in the commentary. Sorry, this like straw wrapper. One of the things that go into in the commentary is what all the references are referring to, so they actually pinpoint them for you, which is kind of cool. So that is it for the DVDs. So a couple of additions to the Dracula selections and 3 additions to the Frankenstein selections. So next up, I picked up some books. Now, first up, I'll just show you what these 3 are. So these are 3 from the bargain table at Chapters here in Canada. It was basically, I think they were $6 each or 3 for $10. So you get 3 books for less than the cost of 2, which was pretty cool. Now that is a bargain. That is a good deal. So I saw they had some classic horror on here, so I thought, yeah, why not? Let's get that. So first up, picked up Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. This is not one of the ones I'll be doing this year, actually, so this will probably be some other thing, either Halloween or Fright Night Friday. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, or The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, is actually quite a short story. So there's the whole story is like 50 pages, so I mean you can blow through that in one sitting. So it's got a few other horror related stories by Robert Louis Stevenson. We've also got The Body Snatcher, which again has had some movie adaptations, The Bottle Imp, Markheim, and Weir of Hermiston. So there you go. So you get 5 classic tales of terror by Robert Louis Stevenson, so that's pretty nice. And then next up we have Henry James, The Turn of the Screw. Now, this one, I didn't realize until I was kind of doing some research for this year, just how many adaptations there have actually been of this. There's been a ton of TV movie adaptations, miniseries adaptations, and everything over the years. The one I'm most familiar with is the 1950s, just beautiful black and white film starring Deborah Kerr, The Innocents, which I believe had a Criterion release recently, which I have, yes. I was trying to remember if it was The Innocents or if it was one of the other ones that had a Criterion, but no, it was The Innocents, got a Criterion release. Beautiful, beautiful film, and my introduction to this particular story. There's been, as I say, many, many movie adaptations of it, and perhaps at some point we'll do like a Turn of the Screw week or something and just take a look at all of them. But I've never read the original book, so again, for, basically $3, yeah, and it's quite a short book. It's not even 150 pages, so so looking forward to checking that out, seeing the original story. And then finally, I picked up this edition of Frankenstein, which just basically a nice... this is what prompted me to get the bargain books in the first place, is I thought, I could really use a nice, just kind of easy to manage, easy to handle edition of Frankenstein to read for the Halloween Fest. So I picked up this one. And then shortly after doing so... actually, I'll get into that in a moment. But the reason I picked that one up, because the only other edition I have is this beautiful coffee table book, which is the complete unabridged book, but featuring illustrations, beautiful black and white illustrations by Bernie Wrightson. Yes, the master of horror himself, who sadly passed away earlier this year. But if we just kind of take a look inside, and you'll notice some additional color there, which... you'd be hard-pressed to find a duplicate edition with that, beautiful additions there. Yeah, I got this when Rosie was still a toddler. So, here, if we just... sorry. This is the reason I got the other one, because this one, while beautiful to look at, is a real pain to read, just because it's so big and cumbersome and stuff. So here, yeah, for example, we got some... like double page spreads of just this beautiful ink, black and white artwork, stark contrast, just fantastic. So anyway, if you happen across this one, grab it, because it is a beautiful, beautiful edition. So anyway, after picking this up and thinking, okay, cool, now I've got my nice, easy to manage edition of Frankenstein that I can read. I did some poking around online. I can't remember what specifically I was looking for, but maybe just to see what other editions of Frankenstein were out there, and it came to my attention, some of you may already be aware of this, but it came to my attention that there are actually multiple versions of Frankenstein out there. I'm not talking abridged and unabridged, no. There are multiple official versions out there, all by Mary Shelley, but the original version was actually published in 1818, and then it was reissued in 1823 with some considerable revisions, and then finally it was revised. I think by her husband, Percy Shelley, was the primary editor on that edition, and then finally in 1831, Mary Shelley herself went back and revised it further. Basically in response to a lot of the critical response to the original 1818 version, where there were certain aspects of it that got a lot of flack. And so what she did was she went back and sort of reworked things for the 1831 edition to make it a little bit more contemporary, a little less controversial, and a little bit more in line with what people wanted. And it is the 1831 version that is the most commonly available. This is the 1831 version. This is the 1831 version. So it's not that it's a bad version. It's just a very watered down version from what the original was. So the original 1818 version has a lot of differences. In particular, one of the big ones being the motivations of Victor Frankenstein, where whereas in the 1831 version, it's more of an academic obsession, where as he's studying about anatomy and life and everything, he develops his obsession. In the original 1818 version, he begins that obsession just simply by witnessing the power of nature as a youth, seeing a lightning bolt hit a tree. It's in the first chapter of it. And it puts a whole different spin on the origins of his obsession and where that came from. Much more emotional and passionate. And I think that was one of the reasons they changed it, was because at the time, you got to understand, this is 1818, long before women's lib. So when it was discovered, I should mention also the 1818 version was published anonymously. Everybody assumed that it was her husband, Percy Shelley, who had written it at the time. They didn't know it was her. So when it came to light that it was actually Mary Shelley who had written it, she got a lot of flack for the way the character of Victor was portrayed, in that a lot of his emotional obsessions were more effeminate and not considered masculine enough. So that's why a lot of the changes were made in terms of his character in the 1831 version. The other is the relationship between him and Elizabeth. In the original book, Elizabeth is his actual cousin. In the 1831 version, she's an adopted orphan who they come to call his cousin, but she's not actually blood related. It puts a very different spin on their relationship in the original version. So that's one thing that's going to be interesting for me to see when in watching the movies, to kind of get a sense of, well, okay, which version did they go with of the story? Like, which version are they adapting? Are they maybe taking bits of one, bits of the other? Are they just going strictly 1831? They're going strictly 1818? So anyway, after finding out that there was these hugely different versions, obviously I was incredibly curious about this 1818 version that everybody was talking about. So I hit one of the used bookstores, and I found it. There it is. So it is available. There are a number of editions. In fact, next year is the 100th anniversary of the original publication, and Penguin Books actually has like an ultimate edition of the 1818 version coming out. So I might pick that one up as well, just to kind of, have some more about it and whatnot. But this is a really nice edition here. This is the second edition of the Broadview Literary Texts edition. Sounds so academic, doesn't it? But this is really cool because it not only has the complete unabridged original 1818 version, but it also has a lot of additional material. It goes into a lot of detail about Mary Shelley's education and where she kind of got her background from, and how that was applied to Victor's education in the story. It also has some original literary reviews, including one by her own husband, Percy Shelley, where he reviews the 1831 edition. So you actually get to see what the critics were saying back in the day about the book, and what some of the original reactions were to it, which I think is really cool to kind of get that historical context. So yeah, so very nice edition. I found this for $4 at one of the used bookstores in town. They also had the first edition. I was considering getting both just for the heck of it, but was kind of short on funds. So I was like, I'll just go with the second edition. It seems to be the more deluxe of the two. And there you go. So I just wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about that, because I don't know that everyone is aware that there are multiple editions. I mean, like this one, I spent a long time sort of digging around the internet trying to find some definitive answers about what are the differences between the two editions, because I honestly didn't know which one this was. And from some of the descriptions I found initially, it wasn't clear. The biggest, easiest way to tell is Chapter 1. If you look at Chapter 1, in the original book, the 1831 version, it just kind of ends with him talking about Elizabeth and how they, were great. They just had a great relationship as kids well into their adult years. In the 1818 version, it goes into that. That's about halfway through the chapter. And then there's even more stuff where Victor goes into how he witnessed the power of nature, the whole thing about the lightning hitting the tree. All of that is only in that version. So if you see that at the end of chapter 1, and it goes into a big long thing about nature and history and some of his early schooling, that's the 1818 version. If it just ends with him talking about how wonderful Elizabeth is, that's the 1831 version. So that's the easiest way to tell kind of at a glance. I think the 1831 version is slightly longer as well. It has an additional chapter to kind of fill in some additional details, I guess. And also, to further add to the confusion, the original 1818 version was split into 3 books, like 3 volumes, and I think it was originally serialized when it was originally published. But and the 1831 version generally is just a straight sequence of chapters. So to add to the confusion, this bargain books edition I had is the sequence of chapters but divided into volumes. So I was like, oh, maybe this is the one. No, apparently it isn't. And yeah, anyway, long and short of it is, if it's the 1818 version, that's considered kind of a special one. So they'll usually make a big mention of it, and then like it's a selling point. They'll make a big mention of it on the cover. There are some fairly cheap editions out there as well that actually contain both versions. I don't know anyone that has the 1823 version, and honestly, I don't know that it's significantly different enough to really bother with. It's really about the earlier one and the later one. So there you go. Hope that gave you some info. I'm probably going to say a lot of that again when I get into talking about the Frankenstein stuff, but I figure some people only watch the reviews, some people only watch the updates, and the main difference by then I'll have actually read it, so I'll probably have a lot more to say about it. Anyway, that is it for this week's Fright Night Friday DVD book update. Hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time. So, big thanks to my Patreon sponsors. Really appreciate the support, guys and gals. You're all awesome, helping to keep the dream alive. And thank you all for watching. You are also all awesome for helping to keep the dream alive. Alrighty, that is it from me to you for now. So until next time, thanks for watching, and sayonara. Oh, I can't put all the books here because I need to. I need to get out of the microphone. Yeah. Stop hitting the mute button. Okie dokie.